In this series of videos, let's cover mapping in Tableau. What I want to do in this series is to dig into the layers of complexity that is built into mapping in Tableau. For preparing these videos, I was actually taking quite a bit of time, and one of the students, when I was explaining this to one of the students, she was asking me why you are spending so much time on mapping in Tableau. It's such an easy topic and you have already covered it. What I did was I covered probably mapping in a minute or two in one of the earlier videos, and that's how simple mapping looks on the surface in Tableau. But there is a lot of complexity built into it. In the last video, we talked about scatter plot, how it is a scary plot because of the jargons and the terminology associated with this. To me, mapping is one of the areas which has probably the highest number of jargons associated with it. And the beauty of Tableau is you don't even know these things. All you need is just double click and you are able to launch. Yeah. So let's start off by just building the two types of maps that are possible in Tableau, and then we'll get into the details. There are two ways that you can create a map in Tableau. So the simplest way is on an empty sheet, click on any field which is called a geo field, which has this globe icon associated with it. So let me start off, for example, country, state here. So this brought Lat and Long fields directly on columns and rows, and then whatever we clicked on along with what is above it in the hierarchy, they are all put here, right? So we'll get into all these details, but the nice thing is for each state there is a point, right? And then all we need to do is just double click on another measure. Now measure is encoded. If you want a third number, second number, so profit also is encoded, right? So very quick, in probably less than 10 seconds, we are able to build a map like this, right? So this is what is technically called the symbol map, right? So where we are putting this circle on top of it. The other type of map is, so I can take any number and then put it on color and see what happens. So now what has happened is, this is California. So the California is now colored with sales based on where it is standing in terms of sales. That the legend is telling you where this is going, right? This is called a field map. As you can see, these are the two types of maps, right? This is called a field map and this is a symbol map, right? So these are the two types of maps in Tableau. And then it did not take us a lot of time to build these maps. Why do we even need to learn all of these jargons that I am pointing at, right? So here are some reasons. So one is if you want to customize anything, right? So here is an example where I have used the field called region, which has values like this, central, east, west, but they are not really by default having a globe icon. These are our own definitions, right? So country, state are geographic fields. These are groupings. So how do you take something that is our own grouping and then assign it like a globe icon so that we can see something like this, right? So this is a custom territory, right? So to understand this, you need to know how Tableau uses different kind of geographic fields. The other thing is, I took my own data, employee master. So let me show you this. And then I double clicked on, for example, state. And then nothing is plotted and I see these 5 unknown locations. Why is that, right? And how do I fix this kind of issues? So this is when you face an issue, how do you solve this? So it is good to know the fundamentals, how things are working. Mapping is so powerful in Tableau. Let me show you a few examples. Here is one example where we have combined both the field map and the symbol map. As you can see, each of the regions, they are filled with a unique color, right? So if I click, that is highlighted. And I also see the sales of each of the states also within that region. So this is also possible. So where we have what's called dual maps, they are kind of dual axis kind of. So this is one possibility. And then to make things even more exciting, you are not really limited to geographical things only. So you can take human body, you can take any type of location, your factory floor, and then plot things there, right? So here is a very interesting map of by each location in the body, you know, what is the number of injuries that probably a hospital is treating, right? This is sample data that I found. Yeah. So this is another possibility. Here is another possibility where distribution centers are plotted, but instead of showing this boring circle, now the tracks are shown using, you know, custom shapes. So this is also possible with Tableau, right? We are still in the geographical thing, but we are showing a custom image on top of it. Now I'll show you a few examples that are given in the Tableau manual. So there are 5 different types of maps that they are pointing about. So this is the typical map that we have seen, which is the first map using circles. So here they have plotted earthquakes and then the magnitude of that. And then the second type of map is the filled map that we have seen. So here they are plotting obesity percentage for each county, which is like a district in our country in India. County in the US and maybe other names in other places. So that is colored based on obesity percentage. This is based on a concept called polygon. And then here this is called a point distribution map that shows you how hailstorms are occurring in the US, right? So the presence tells you where the hailstorms are occurring. And then here you have a flow map where you can show the flow of a storm, how it is going and the speed of the wind, how strong it is in what places. Yeah. And then finally, so here metro station traffic in Paris, as well as for example here bike sharing data in Seattle, Washington, where you could see even the street level information. So all of this is nicely captured in this page. What type of maps you can build. I will include a link to this in the video itself. So here is a nice page which gives you detailed instructions. So now having seen all of this, so if you want to really create these kind of maps, you need to understand the terminology associated with mapping in Tableau. So now let's come back and get into the terminology. Before we get there, I just wanted to review our 5 key messages framework, right? So we were in the distribution area. That is where the mapping occurred, if you remember. So mapping is a type of a geographical or a spatial distribution where we are talking about locations or spaces, right? It is not limited to geographical thing only, right? As we have seen the human body, anything which can be a space, right? So that is one type of distribution. So that's what we are interested in. And if you review the distribution, the idea is how does a single number change on its own axis? And if you remember, correlation is about two numbers, how do they relate to each other? So the question that you should ask yourself is, why is mapping coming after correlation? I've already covered distribution first. Logically, I should have covered mapping because it is a subset of a distribution. But then I've skipped that and then went into the other advanced topic and then now coming to correlation. Why? To me, mapping is about, it is taking the message of distribution, but it is using a chart which I will call the ambassador of correlation. I'm not going to tell you what it is, so you probably know it if you have paid attention to the previous videos. So it's taking a chart which is an ambassador of correlation, but using it to convey the message of distribution. That's why I wanted to cover both of them and then get into this. So now, the question is, how in the world distribution is about a single number, scatter plot is about two numbers. How can we basically put them together, right? In the map, there are no numbers, only locations. So how is it possible? So the message is about a single number, scatter plot, the chart that is used is about two numbers, but in the map, there are no numbers, only locations, which is text data. How? How can we actually do this? So do you remember this? Dimensions can behave like numbers sometimes. If you remember that date sometimes can behave like number, right? So we can draw continuous axis. And the question we have to ask is, how do we make a text like location behave like a number? So the behavior of date, how can we do something like that to the location? So let's take a simple example. Here is text data, high, medium, low, let's say priorities, right? How will you convert this into a number? Right? Simple. So we can assign a number to each of this. 1 is low, 3 is high, right? So we can assign a number. So how about these texts? So I've given different cities, some in India, some in the US, right? So how about these texts? Can we assign a number? Right? So what has happened is, so all of this work has been done, right? So people have been dealing with mapping and then they've assigned numbers. Rather than one number, they've assigned two numbers to each of these locations, right? So those two numbers are called latitude and longitude. That's the first set of jargons. So let's enter the world of dragons. Jargons or dragons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me stop here. There's so many of these jargons. So let's slay the dragons. Sorry, jargons. So let's start understanding latitude and longitude. Do you remember this? Yes, we're very intimately familiar with something like this. What about this? Right? So we took something 3D and then now this is in 2D, isn't it? So now on this 2D map, if I put an x-axis and then center point is a 0, this is plus x, this is minus x, and then I put a y-axis, up is plus y, and then now we have two axes, right? So if you remember, so here is the definition of latitude. Latitude is you are going across, longitude is you are going up and down. I will include a nice video which will give you the basics if you want to watch this. For me, here is a nice way to remember this. Latitude, we all are familiar with cafe latte, right? So the tall latte. So logically, to me, in my mind, latte is standing tall. So latitude should represent up to down. And then longitude, long is associated with length, which goes across. So in my mind, if these terms meant longitude means going across, latitude means going up and down, because we can picturize cafe latte, it would have been easier, but the experts don't really care about these kind of silly generalizations or pictures, so they've swapped it. So latitude, think of cafe latte, it has fallen flat, so it is across. Longitude, you can think of an orange and the peeled orange, how that is standing up, so it's up and down. But you don't need to remember this. I'm just giving you some fun facts for you to remember. So now if you visualize scatter plot, it also has a XY. So map is nothing but a scatter plot, which is an XY plot with a background image which we are basically pasting on this scatter plot. That X and Y is called latitude and longitude. Yeah. So which background image to use? Here is where the question comes. The one we all are know. Which one? Uncle Google, right? So there is. So this is the technical term for this, web marketer. This is used by pretty much everybody. Basically what this does is, when we have a 3D object, here is an experiment for you to try. Take an orange, try to peel it off and then spread it out. So into a 2D, a 3D picture into a 2D thing. That is what these guys have done. And obviously they introduce different errors and different assumptions and stuff. So this is the most famous one, but we don't have to care about it. Tableau has done it for us. I'm just telling you because it's one more trivia. So we have covered latitude and longitude, map background. So now let's get into the next set of things. So let's talk about geocoding, geographic roles. Yeah. So how to assign XY to these locations? We said two numbers have been assigned, but how do we assign this? Yeah. So how will we do this manually? So if I am in Excel, right? So for each country, for example, I could go to Google Maps and look up Lat and Long, and then I can enter. And the state level, I can put, okay, here is the country, here is the state, and Lat Long. I have taken it for, I'm building it up for Bangalore, right? And then city level, I have country, state, and city. And this is what we could do, right? So I one by one, so for country, one Excel, for state, another Excel, for city, another Excel. This is how we will manually build this, right? So what does Tableau do? First, Tableau identifies whether a column has geographic data. How does it do? Does it have a genie which can go figure out this? Simple. It looks at your column name. If you use, a familiar column name like city, state, these are common things. And even in a few other languages also it supports. So if your column name says city, it assumes you have geographic. If you call something like your, for example, your customers a city, then, Tableau will have a problem with you, right? So basically it looks at the name of your column and it's going to decide, okay, what it contains. Then it has to decide what it contains, whether it contains country, state, city, or something else, right? So that is called the level of detail. Again, it looks at the name and then it makes a guess. That's all it is doing. And then it goes into each of these items. For example, in city, if I have Bangalore or Seattle, it's going to take that name and go into a database which looks like the Excel that we have seen, right? So, and then it is going to get the XY, the lat and long from there. This is the process it is using, right? So if you want to point to a city and then it goes there and it finds two matches there. For example, there are cities like Paris, for example, which is a very famous one in the France and then not so well known in the US as well. So if it gets that, unless you tell some way to basically differentiate between the two, by for example saying I'm in this country, right? So Tableau will not be able to really plot this, right? So once you have this picture of Excel in your mind, I think how this process of geocoding works is very clear. So Tableau looks at your column name, figures out what it is, country, state, city, and then when you actually plot, it is gonna take this and then goes to its own database, which resembles something like our Excel, and then going to get the lat long and then plot it for you. That's all. So if something is wrong, the first thing that can go wrong is you have a different name that is not recognized by Tableau. Then you have to tell Tableau, hey Tableau, here is state information is here, so recognize this as a state. That is the usage for geographic role. So you have to go and say this is the geographic role of a state or a city or anything, right? So that's what you are doing. And then once you are in there, if the location name is not found, that means the name you are using and the name Tableau is using may not be matching. For example, you might have a different spelling. For example, in my country, we have a different language. It's not English, Tamil. And then the way it is spelled in English could be different. Google Map uses something else, you know. So in that case, Tableau may not recognize this. All I need to do is edit this location to match what Tableau has. Yeah. So this is the process. So once you understand really what's going on, how this whole concept of geocoding and roles work, this is super easy. Yeah. So summarizing, geocoding is nothing but taking a text you are giving and identifying this as a state, city, whatever it is. First identifying whether it's a geographic field, then deciding on what level it is, whether it's country, state, and then actually finding the XY coordinates, which is called lat and long. And then finally plotting this. So finally, now let's tackle the next two things, which is data layers and map services. So data layer is, so not only adding this, so when you're plotting a map, so behind the scenes, you can plot highways, you can plot the oceans, you have a lot of these details. That's what these map services are going to give you. Yeah, so you could, if you are interested in some specialty type of mapping, so you could have dedicated things that could give you this kind of information. Data layer can add, for example, things like population, some sort of a demographics on top of it. Tableau comes with some of these items for the US, which I'll show you in one of the future videos. So that's all. So you could just put data on top of it also. Mapping works like this. The background image is one layer. Then you have the actual Tableau thing itself. Then you could have another layer which shows the data itself. So it is built in multiple layers. So that covers data layers and map services. So now, having seen the mapping services and data layers, let's tackle this polygons and points, which I've already hinted at. So what is polygon? Simply, polygon is how do you draw borders around it. If you remember, in XY, we are plotting a single point. When you want to draw a border around, for example, here in this case, a state, right? So I need to know all the points that are lying on that and then in what order to connect them. That's why, so the polygon is telling you the shape of it and then the points that are lying and then how to connect in what order. That's all it is telling you, polygons. So by default, your field map uses that, and you can just live without knowing any more detail about polygon until you come across a case where you have your custom territories and then you want to draw a border around them, like you want to plot parks or some of your custom locations and stuff. Till then, this is a very advanced topic. You don't need to know, just know that it exists, and then when you need, you can just go and look into the detail in manual and other places. And that brings us to the last two things, which are probably easy: pan and zoom, radial and lasso select. These are the terms that are used when you are actually not producing a map, but when you are using the map. These are terms that I didn't actually fully understand, so I looked them up to understand what they are. So I just wanted to share with you what they are. So here is the dictionary definition of panning, right? So I will let you read this. So if you remember, many of us take videos. So when in a video, if you are just moving around to cover a wider area, that's called a panoramic view, right? So pan is just that. So in a map, you want to just move the map so that you could see, because remember it is a 3D thing. So you are moving to see the other side, you know. So that's what is called pan. Zoom, we all know, zoom in and zoom out. So that's not really. And then the last two things are about the selecting part. There is a radial select. I will let you read the definition of this. As they say, the pictures, a single picture, conveys 1,000 words. Here is a picture. So radial is going across the, lines. So that's the what is called the radius of the circle. And then lasso, here is a definition. And here the picture really conveys. Here is the picture. So that's lassoing, right? So it's really an unstructured, definition or selection of many things So both are useful when if you want to, for example, create custom groupings, you can use lasso select. If you want to, for example, do this analysis of how many customers are living around a certain store, for example. So one of my customers was telling each time he wants to put a new store, he looks at a 5 kilometer the circumference, how many other stores are there, and he uses that kind of analysis. So in those cases, the radial or the circular kind of a selection could be used. So with that, we have covered all the jargons. So hopefully, so they made sense to you, and then with the fun, hopefully you will be able to remember them, right? So this is not really technical. You would agree with me. This is not really, I mean, rocket science stuff. We all see a globe, we all see an orange, we know how to unpeel the orange. So, and we have seen how to assign points to this different locations, which has already been done. So all of this would come to help you to build a lot of these advanced stuff. So this is the URL that I was pointing out. It is there in the online Tableau manual itself. I'll post this also in the video. In the future videos, we'll get into apply what we have learned. Let's start with some of the simple use cases. For some of the complex ones like that body image or some of these polygons, I will leave you to go on the internet and then search and then find. There are people who know this a lot better than me. I'm not an expert in one of these areas, so I'll cover what I would consider to be the topics that would be applicable to a large set of audience. And for the special cases, you are better off researching on the internet.